Hey, welcome to the channel, everybody. Today we are going to start by setting up VirtualBox. So as you guys can see, I'm currently on my Windows machine. As a seasoned developer, I don't find Windows to be the most accessible for doing things like managing Kubernetes and developing web apps and other things. So our first steps will be diving into configuring VirtualBox. Before we start, let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about where this series is going to go. So, as I was diving into my DevOps career and trying to figure out how to set up Kubernetes and to work with all these different tools and technologies, I would often jump to YouTube and find that the tutorials just didn't cover end to end what I needed to know in order to set up my own cluster and deploy my own services and web applications at scale. And this is who I'm targeting for these set of tutorials. So the first thing we're going to do is set up VirtualBox so we can manage our Kubernetes environments. After that, we will install a local K8s cluster, deploy into that, and start working on a small example web app. Once we complete that next step, we're going to be moving into learning TerraGrunt, which is a management platform for deploying things to different cloud ops and things like that. And then lastly, we'll be using TerraGrunt to deploy the web app that we build into a production environment using EKS. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to just go to Google and we're going to search VirtualBox. So VirtualBox is just a way that you can run virtual machines on your local Windows or Linux or Mac computer. It's super powerful and I've used it a lot in the past. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to click on the downloads section. We're going to click on Windows hosts since we're running Windows. However, if you're using Mac, you can click on the Mac host as well. We're going to go ahead and save the binary to install. Next, we're going to open up the installer. As you can see here, it's going to ask if you want to allow this app to make changes to your device. Just go ahead and hit select yes and move forward with the installation process. All right, give me 1 second so I can pull the window over to you. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just hit next here. We're going to sign away our life to the terms agreement. Go ahead and hit next. And from here, I think all of the defaults look okay. So let's just hit next. This will temporarily disconnect you. Yep, that's fine as well. And then it looks like it will ask us if we want to install other dependencies, such as the Python core and the Win32 API. Once again, hit yes. And then I think all of this should look okay. If you decide to change any of these, feel free, but for our purposes, we're just going to use the defaults. All right, finally, let's go ahead and start the install. Okay, so this is going to take a while. Let's go ahead and download the actual operating system that we're going to be hosting within VirtualBox. So I think a good one to get started with is Ubuntu. So let's go ahead and just Google Ubuntu. Click on the first link, https ubuntu.com, and let's go ahead and click downloads. So we're gonna actually opt for the Ubuntu desktop. This is just a nice Linux operating system that will give us better support for all the different tools we're going to be using, such as TerraGrunt, Kubernetes, potentially PyCharm, and more. All right, so go ahead and click on the download. So in this case, we're actually going to download 24.04.1 LTS. So in the future, if you're watching these videos in a few years, this should still be available to you since it's a long-term support version of Ubuntu, which means that it will have 5 years of free security updates and maintenance updates. All right, so let's go ahead and click download. The download should start automatically, but if it doesn't, you can click that link. And then once again, let's just save this to our downloads. All right, so this might take a while. Let's pop back over to VirtualBox and make sure everything looks good. So it looks like everything's installed correctly. It's going to ask you if you want to start Oracle VirtualBox after the installation. Let's go ahead and do that, and we'll just hit finish. All right. So over here we have VirtualBox. This is where you actually set up your virtual machine. Once we finish with the Linux download, we will go ahead and start. So let's just check on the progress of that. Looks like there's a minute left. In the meantime, why don't you take a little break and we'll resume when this finishes.
All right, everybody. The Ubuntu image has now successfully downloaded. So let's go ahead and set that up in VirtualBox. So the first thing you may need to do is restart your computer. If you see some errors related to SUP-R3 hardened WinSpawn. If not, what you can do is the following. You can go to the command prompt. You can run it as an administrator. If you'd like to make changes to your system, you could just go ahead and say yes, and then we're going to go ahead and type the following command: net start ebox soup. I've already done this, but in your case, it may say the service has been started, which is fine. Let's go ahead and exit the command prompt and go ahead and continue with our setup. So I'm going to click New. I'm going to call this Linux distro. The folder where you want to save the VM is fine, and then let's go ahead and navigate to the ISO that we downloaded for Ubuntu. Let's go ahead and click on that and say OK. And the next thing we need to do is we need to update the unintended install. So for my case, I'm going to change the username to Santiago. I'm going to add a password that I know. The host name and domain name look OK. We'll skip the guest editions for now. We'll do that when we actually have it set up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it 8 gigabytes of RAM, so it's 8,192 megabits. And then I'm going to give it 12 CPUs. If you notice sluggish performance, you can always come back in and adjust this, but it's usually safe to go up to kind of the green line, though you can push it further if you notice that it doesn't affect your installation. All right, next thing we need to do is create a hard drive. So in my case, I'm just going to pre-allocate the full space, and I'm going to give this 32 gigabytes. I think this should be more than enough for what we're trying to do. And once that's all configured, go ahead and click Finish. So you'll see it creating the medium first. This is creating the hard drive and setting up the operating system in VirtualBox. And shortly, it should start the actual operating system, and we can go through with the installation process. So for now, we just have to be patient while this completes. Awesome. All right, so now you'll see this powered off. You should get a little notification here that says powering the virtual machine up. If you're in a newer version of VirtualBox, this could change, but for the version that we're using, which was specified earlier in the video, it should just go ahead and automatically start up your virtual machine. So you'll notice a little window will pop up. Go ahead and click on it and hit enter to try or install Ubuntu. If you want to, once you do that, you'll be locked into the virtual machine screen. If you need to break out of that, just hit right control on your keyboard. You can see I regained functionality of my cursor. From here, I'm just going to get rid of those notifications, and then I'll click back on this again. This will blink for a little while. You just have to be patient while VirtualBox begins to set up the Ubuntu image. So just a few more minutes here. While we wait, I think this is a good time to address issues that you may encounter. So oftentimes when dealing with the DevOps or any type of software, you might find you run into an issue that you're not sure how to solve. I always find it's best to go on Google and input the actual error message that you're seeing. And then from there, there's generally somebody who's encountered that. You can read the forums. Oftentimes, people will give you solutions such as running a command in the command prompt or installing a new binary. For those specific situations, I would just be very careful and make sure you understand what it is that you're actually doing, just to avoid installing something like a malware on your device. All right, so it looks like we're moving forward. There seems to be an issue with the graphics drivers. We can adjust that later, but for now, I believe this should still work. So let's just be patient for a moment and let this continue to run through. Once again, we're just going to clear these notifications, and now we wait. All right, welcome back. So for me, it probably took around 20 or 30 minutes to do the install. What I did notice was during the install, the memory usage was pretty high. So it may help if you bump the memory usage of your virtual machine to maybe, if you have 16 gigs, see if you can go to 12. In my case, I have 8, which might not be enough, but we can always adjust that later, and we'll cover that in a few minutes. All right, so you should be at the point where it's asking you for your login credentials. So go ahead and type in your password, and make sure we get that right. And from here, it should log us in. So let's just give this a minute. Still seems like my memory usage is pretty high, which may be affecting this. All right, awesome. So now we got to walk through the final steps of setting up Ubuntu. Okay. Let's see. I think we can just skip Ubuntu Pro. We don't need it. Help improve Ubuntu. A lot of people will say no here, but I think it's good to say yes. I think a lot of times the developers will probably get things like crash logs and other useful information for them to help make their operating system better. So we'll go ahead and just leave this as yes, share the system data. We're not going to get any applications for the App Center, but we can go ahead and finish. All right, perfect. So now we have Ubuntu running in a virtual machine. Let's go ahead and see if we can modify a few things to make it look better. Like a true developer, I think the first thing you should do is click on the settings up here and change it to dark style. That's just personal preference, but if you want to do that, go ahead. Next thing we need to do, let's go ahead and update our resolution. So the monitor that I'm currently using is 1920 by 1080p. Let's go ahead and apply that so we can get full screen. This will just make everything look a lot better. So once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and keep the changes. All right, so the next thing we need to do is set up our virtual our host guest editions. So down at the bottom here, you'll have this little menu. I believe, so you kind of need to hover over it and click, and there should be a setting within here. So we'll hit devices, and we're going to insert the guest edition CD. Okay, so you should see that this is mounting. Okay, so the guest editions will give us access to things like copy and paste from within our host machine over to our virtual machine. So let's say we have a URL that we're on the left side on our host machine, and we want to use it on the right side. This will give us access to do so. All right, so let's see here. So what we want to do is we want to click on this. And I believe we want to click on the auto run bash script. So this, if you read this and open it, you'll see that this is a bash script that will run. I believe we can right click and we can run it as a program. All right, so this is going to require root access. So go ahead and enter your credentials and hit authenticate. Okay, so it looks like we need to install bzip2 and tar. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. So I'm going to click on the bottom left menu and I'm going to open up a terminal and I'm going to type sudo apt install bzip2 talk. You can go ahead and enter your password, type yes, and now this should install the dependencies that the VirtualBox Editions needs. Alright, so let's go back to the disk and let's go ahead and try to run the program again. Once again, you'll need to authenticate. Alright. So everything's looking good, and I believe this will just take a little bit of time to run. Please install GCC make Pro packages. Okay. So I believe we will have to install a few more packages. So looks like I'm having some visual issues, so I'm going to hit Control and F just to get out of this. Alright, so let's go ahead and try to install this. Might take a second. I believe it's freezing up a little bit. I'm going to go back to the full screen. And it seems as though it is frozen. So let's just give this a second to recover. Worst case, you can manually shut this down. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll try one thing real quick. While we're out here, let's go ahead and update a few settings. I've noticed that it's a little bit sluggish, and I talked about increasing the RAM. So let's go ahead and go right to that border. So I'm going to go right to that border, and then I'm going to click down. Okay. So in my case, it looks like I can go right up to here before I get that error message saying invalid. So let's hit OK, and then let's click one more thing here. Alright, so a few extra features we can play with here. One of them is bi-directional copying. So what I'm going to set up here is the following. I'm going to set up the shared clipboard. So this would be if you copy a URL or any bit of text or a file, you can paste it within your Linux distro. And then the same thing for your drag and drop. So this would allow you to just drag and drop a file, maybe a second monitor, or you have this in split screen mode with your Windows environment, you can just drag folders in, which is nice. There's also a feature here for shared folders, which you can mount a folder from your Windows machine onto your Linux distro. I tend to not use this. I tend to try to do everything within Linux, and then if I need files or something dragged over, I'll just use this functionality instead. All right, so let's hit OK. Let's just restart this one more time. Now that it has a little bit more RAM. Hopefully it should be faster in this instance. I believe we need to install a few more dependencies for the guest editions, which will allow the copying and pasting that I was talking about earlier. So we'll go ahead and do that once we get back into the operating system. So once again, I'm going to hit right Control and F just to put this in full screen mode. We'll give this a minute to boot up, and then we will install those additions, or install those dependencies. We will then install the Guestbox Editions code, and we will kick it off. Alright, so I can see VirtualBox is starting up. It's using quite a bit of memory, which is to be expected. We'll just be patient and let this run. Alright, so let's go ahead and log in. Alright, perfect. So give that a minute to load up. We can see that we have the VirtualBox still set up, but let's go ahead and install the other dependencies that we're going to need here. So the command that we're going to type, which we should have done this first. We should have updated apt to get the newest version of those binaries. So we'll do sudo apt update, and this will just update the packages that you're able to install. All right, now we'll do sudo apt install, and we build essential gcc make perl and dkns. Okay, so it's going to install those, so go ahead and hit yes when prompted. And then we need to wait for this to install. It's going to take a few minutes, so just go ahead and be patient. Awesome. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to run this. So let's go ahead and copy the directory here. We'll do Control-C, and then I'm going to paste that with Control-Shift, and then I'm going to go, which is change directory. We need to type sudo dot Linux editions dot. Awesome. Remove the old version of VirtualBox guest editions, and then it should reinstall the new version with those build dependencies. So we'll just be patient. You can see here now, it's not giving us those same error messages about missing GCC or Perl. Those are just sub-level dependencies that this program uses to install the guest box editions. So let's be patient. Once this is complete, we're going to do a reboot, and then we'll test out that the copy and pasting works. So you can see here, you may still consider relogin if some user-specific session services were not automatically restarted. So let's go ahead and just type reboot, and this is going to just automatically reboot our Ubuntu instance for us, which is good. We'll wait for that to get us to the login page again. Should be a little bit quicker now that we gave it more memory. Though if that's still not doing it, we could also potentially give it some more CPU power as well, which could speed things up. Though in my case, it seems to be the memory that's keeping this a little bit slower. So if you're using a desktop with 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes of RAM, or a more powerful laptop than what I have, you should be a little bit better off. But nonetheless, it's still very workable once you're actually in the operating system. And for those of you that are new to Ubuntu, you should feel right at home. It's semi-similar to Windows. It's pretty intuitive. There's a lot of powerful features I encourage you to explore. I also encourage you to explore different operating systems that are Linux-based. So personally, I use Elementary, which gives you a really nice user interface, similar to a MacBook, something like that. But I do notice that there's some issues with it. It's pretty standard with a new operating system. But it's fun to explore and to see which flavor you like the best. A lot of people use Debian. Some people use Mint. So some people use Kubuntu. So there's just so many options for you to choose and explore. And the nice part about VirtualBox is you can test all of them out individually, and then you can decide which one you actually want to use on your hardware and install directly onto the hard drive so you get the best performance. All right, so let's give this a second. I'm going to open up the files here, and I'm actually going to eject this disk because we no longer need it, which is good. And let's go ahead and test out that this works. So I'm going to pull open this web browser where I was Googling an issue. I'm going to Control-C to copy the URL, and then hopefully, if all was successful, we can paste that in here. Oops. So you can see when I do a Control-V, it pastes in, which is fantastic.
Thanks for watching this experiment in Santi's Dev Lab. Next time we will begin experimenting with local Kubernetes development tools. If you found this helpful, hit the like and subscribe button and click that bell for notifications on upcoming experiments.